Okay, we're here on the second episode of Summoning Insight, my show with Monte Cristo here. For anyone who didn't see the first episode, first of all, shame on you. Like, what are you doing with your life? Get it in order, get your priorities in order. No, I'll give a brief intro though. Okay, so I'm Thorin. I'm a senior esports content editor on Gamers. I got that right this time. I'm here with Monte Cristo. He's a commentator for OGN and Masters, CLG coach. He reminded me that he used to write articles. I think he does like 2 per year or something. So technically, like a journalist.
I do now only do 2.
You do? Yeah. Okay. Yeah. You've eased back on that a bit though. So how you doing, Monty?
I'm doing well. We got a lot to talk about, especially about All-Stars.
Sure.
Now. We're recording this, I have to say, we are recording this before the big Reddit AMA that Riot is having. So the information that we're using to have this discussion is information that I talked to Waylon Roselle, Riot Mages, on Twitter about. But I feel like we've got pretty much all the facts now about All-Stars. You know, we know what the format's going to be, generally speaking, and we know how the teams are going to qualify. And it's a bit of a weird one, isn't it?
I mean, to start things off, okay, we hear the news, and it officially came out yesterday for me, which was, okay, All-Stars is still called All-Stars, but there's no All-Stars there. It's just the best team from each region. So really, it's like Worlds, but with only the best team, okay? It's not. And so start right there. What was your reaction to that?
Can we start with the name?
Yeah, yeah.
It's not All-Stars, right? If you look at any other sport and the way that All-Stars takes place, this is no longer an All-Stars game. And yes, fans are going to be able to vote in 2 players from each region. Presumably, of course, they still said that we're going to be voting on format. Fans are going to vote on format and stuff like that. But presumably, 5 regions, 2 players from each region, 1 player from each region on a 5-man team, right? That's what we can expect. That's why the number likely exists. So having that, but you can say, okay, yes, these are all-star teams. These players are being voted in, but there's a lot of issues with this format. We'll get into that later. Let's talk about how the primary event is basically just a who's on top for team number 1 in each region going in. So not all-stars. Even Riot said
it's just Worlds with only first place.
Yes, it's Worlds with only first place, and they said that they were modeling it off after kind of the Confederation Cup from FIFA. So there's that coming in. So we can assume that there's going to be the 5 teams in a round-robin group stage, either single or double round-robin. Who knows what the format is going to be yet. And then best of 3 semifinals into a best of 5 finals. Now, to start off with, I think it's great that they're doing more international tournaments. I just wish they would change the name from All-Stars to something else. I don't understand why they feel the need to keep All-Stars. We're in an evolving format for League of Legends. Riot wants to do things every year. All-Stars last year was far from perfect. Maybe we should start there. Maybe we should talk about All-Stars last year and compare it to this year and say what we like and didn't like about it.
Yeah, I mean, I think the first place to talk about the topic is the All-Stars issue, of the fact that there's not essentially going to be an All-Star. No, fucking semantics here. We all know what I really mean by that. It's not an All-Star game. It's just a mini Worlds. So last year, here's the thing, okay? I'm like so hardcore about games that I don't really give a fuck unless it's like real competition, because I know people they can't try as hard, okay? So for me, All-Stars is just for fans. Even when I watch the NBA and I watch the NHL, I'm a fan of it, okay? I only watch those games for I don't get super into it, unless it's like really close at the end of the game or something. But I think it serves a purpose, okay, which is the point I wanted to make, okay, which is you don't have to have All-Stars, but I actually like the role that All-Stars works in real sports. Because one of the key things is whenever you see a Hall of Fame, like a guy getting put into the Hall of Fame, okay, and they say, okay, he won like 2 world championships and he won like some trophy for like MVP, they always list how many All-Stars appearances you get. Because the whole thing is, you can't affect how good your team is, how good your general manager is, how well things are going. But if you're really the best at your position, you're the best shooting guard in the NBA or the best forward in the hockey, you get to be on All-Star team every year. So you at least get some accolade, okay? That's like a reason to keep playing and go, okay, even though I'm on a bad team now, like I proved at least I'm good. So in that sense, I think in LoL, it could play a very good role. Because, for example, you could have a guy, like, let me think of who someone would be good. Okay, so someone who's being bandwagoned quite hard right now is Zion Spartan, okay? I wouldn't necessarily say he's the best top laner, but he'd be in the mix for it at least, okay? And he's on a terrible team, but if let's say he goes ham for the rest of the season and he got voted in as the All-Star, okay, he's not going to fucking win LCS, but at least he could say, oh, I was the best NA top laner, and so that would be something for him to have as an accomplishment. Don't you see this is like a good something that's positive about it, even from a competitive aspect, right?
Right. Yeah, I totally agree. And you do get that recognition. Now, if we look at last year's tournament, I agree. All-Stars should be just for fun. And the problem last year was that there was a real seed for Worlds riding on that. And why I don't think it should be taken that way is because any team sport, what matters is the team synergy, right? You're saying, well, you can have this one player who's really great, but it's the team synergy that matters in League of Legends, and I don't think an all-star event should decide which real teams go to the premier competition in the world. To me, that's just ridiculous. So I was not happy about that last year, and we don't even know, really, if there's going to be an extra seed involved this time. They haven't said anything. I think it's just a cash prize, but who knows if they're going to tack on anything else at the end. But I'm pretty sure that they're not going to do seeds again this year for this tournament. Although I would say that it makes more sense to do the seed this year than it did last year.
Well, the funny thing is that the point you made there was what I was like. That was like the bullet I had loaded up for if they did All-Stars again this year to fire at Riot. Okay, which is that ruined the whole premise of All-Stars, because what I just described there is that okay, if Zion Spartan is the best top player in NA, then we vote him in the top position. Okay, but that's not how anyone voted, because everyone knew my region has to win, otherwise I get one less team there, and so everyone else would be like, well, does Zion Spartan have a good synergy with the jungler? And that shouldn't be how it's voted.
I agree.
Because then you get into a scenario, okay, where someone like Genja can't speak English, right? He's the only one in Gambit who can't speak English at all. Well, by that logic, if anyone else on the team has to speak in English, which is everyone in Europe, then you can't vote Genja in, even if he turned into Uzi overnight and was like the best by far. So you've actually just ruined the premise of your own All-Stars. That's not All-Stars, at that point. That's like make a makeshift team from your region, which isn't All-Stars again, because now you're voting in the third best AD carry because he speaks better English than you know what I mean? It's like it didn't make sense. Okay, so anyway, if we take that out of the equation, so All-Stars is gone, the old format, and now we have the mini worlds. If we ignore the All-Star thing, the mini worlds tournament's cool. I like it.
I agree entirely. I just don't want them to call it All-Stars, because that's not what it is. It's a mislabeling, and I find it so puzzling that Riot should do this, because Riot is obsessed with making esports like normal sports. They look at the tournaments and everything that, like, if you look at what Riot does, even the features they put out with professional sports players, professional basketball players, professional football players playing League of Legends, and the emphasis that they put on legitimizing it as a sport in concept is so high that I would have thought that the semantics of what is or is not an all-star game when compared to traditional sports would be important to them. But now I just feel it's entirely misleading.
Especially because if you tie the two things together, the fact it's still called All-Stars gives a really misleading thing to anyone who doesn't follow the game really closely. Because if you see, okay, so you were on the All-Star team for this year, but then the player we're talking about, let's say ROCCAT had gotten in, okay? ROCCAT aren't on #1 now, but they were up until the last few weeks in Europe, okay? They were #1 for like 3 weeks in a row or something. Let's say they get voted in. So then someone looks at this lineup and they go, "Oh, okay, so Zaxxus must be the best top laner in Europe." Well, no, I don't think even Zaxxus would tell you that, So that's like the semantics are actually killing me here, guys. Like it's doing the exact opposite of what you're telling me it's doing.
It's bad.
I mean,
why can't we just change the name to Winners' Cup or something? Like, why can't we just change
Spring Championship or summer? Yeah, whatever. Anything. That's the funny thing. I don't know why they've held that part over. Especially because the first thing I said, and you remember we had this conversation, the first thing I said wasn't like, oh, that's really cool, which it should be my first impression, okay, to this tournament. The first thing I said was, people are going to go apeshit that it's called All-Stars and you can't vote people in.
Yeah.
Right?
The counter argument to this is that, of course, you can vote 2 players in, but
who cares about that thing, man? Who cares about the 2v2 bullshit?
Yeah, who cares about that? And especially because, if only 2 players get voted, are they going to... Here's my question. Are they going to designate, well, Korea's going to send a mid laner and a jungler, right? Or is it just going to be 2 players, period, and they're going to have to figure out what the hell positions they're playing on whatever team or environment that they get put into? Because that's weird. That's really weird.
I mean, one feature that's funny is that I wish for last year's All-Stars they'd done the idea of just doing it as a group stage first. Because you'd think, okay, let's imagine in a hypothetical world where money and time weren't the constraints, okay? We wanted to have a real All-Star game where we're going to have all the regions play. You'd want all the teams to play each other. You know, I'd figure. Like, I'd want to see Europe play against Korea. And I want to see Europe play against China. I wouldn't want, like, Europe to lose one game, then lose another game, and then be out of the tournament. Like, surely the whole point is they're going to play each other. So that feature is good, actually. I like the group stage idea.
Yeah.
I even like the idea that I think from the post it maybe said, like, it was winner take all or whatever. Because, again, like, who really cares who comes third in it or whatever? Really, you should be trying to just be the team who wins it all. So I think all that's fine. I even think, yeah, it's good to have this international tournament. What I thought we could do then is, based on what we know now, so we don't know what damage control Riot will be able to do in that AMA thread. I got the sense, okay, before we get into that, okay, here's one thing I want to say, Monte Cristo. I think we saved Riot's fucking ass before this AMA because we, like, smoked them out into, like, giving official reasons that I don't think they actually had thought of. Like, I made the sarcastic point, okay, that, like, the first question someone would ask is like, right, let's imagine you're the person presenting this idea to me. You're the guy at Riot who came up with this. So just tell me, like, the basic idea, like, tell me the premise of what you're going to do this year.
Well, so I'm Riot guy, and we're going to get the best team from every region in the spring season. Okay. And we're going to put them together. We're going to do a round robin, so all the teams get to play each other. We'll only eliminate one. You know, we got the 5 regions, the 5 leagues. And then we'll send the top 4 teams, 1 versus 4, 2 versus 3, into a semifinal bracket, single elimination, best of 3 into best of 5. Winner takes all.
Okay, I love the idea. That's a great idea. But here's my problem, okay? When are we going to hold this final? What date are you thinking?
Well, I mean, that depends on venues, obviously. You know, we think we want to hold it in France, so we're looking at Paris. We've got this really nice 6,000 seat theater, but it's only maybe it's only available on this weekend and this weekend. So I guess we're going to have to go with May 8th through 11th.
Oh, whoa! Wait a minute. You all the 5 regions, yeah, one from each. Because here's the problem, like. I mean, I only work at Riot, so I don't really follow all the leagues and that. I like LCS, Dyrus, TSM, but from what I know, all the leagues don't run at the same time. So, like the Chinese league, like I'd probably look into that before we announce this, guys. Like, glad I got to you first. Before we announce it, check when the Chinese LPL finishes. Definitely check when OGN finishes, because that's not even a league format, man. That's like a tournament. So you're gonna be in deep shit if that doesn't end first. But once you've checked that and you know you've got the date synced up, then go live with the news and don't even worry about it at that point. Like, the reason why I made this setup here is obviously that part there, which would be the first thing you'd say, never happened, okay? Like, as we was asking them this on Twitter, you could sort of sense, like, DEFCON levels going up, people scrambling. When does LPL finish? So what are we doing with that? And then, okay, the Seth MacFarlane-looking guy who works for Riot came on and he was like, well, I think what we'll do is we'll just use the number 1 ranked team in each region. Whew, saved us there, guys. And then we were like, okay, fair enough. Yeah, LPL is a league. You'll have the number 1 ranked guy. OGN's a tournament, you know, so they'd actually have like rankings. No, I knew that. Probably use the people with the most points. Yeah, but it's a tournament, mate. Like there's not a league. No, circuit points. Yeah. Well, there was one team has all those already. Yeah, I knew that. Like, dude, come on. What did you think when those answers were coming back?
I mean, okay. I'll take a different approach than you. I'm not going to be quite so cynical about
okay, I like this.
Okay.
I've managed to make Monte Cristo come back from the edge here. Okay.
Yeah. Okay, so I will say that maybe they weren't doing damage. Maybe they had all these answers in advance. But what is clear was that this wasn't planned out very well with scheduling the leagues previously. So regardless of when they were looking for the answers to this, it's clear from the schedule that the planning and the scheduling of it came after the scheduling of the leagues took place. And for those of you that missed what happened on Twitter when this was announced, I was looking at it and I was like, well, I was asking and they said, well, it's going to be points by the 25th. And it's sort of, you're right, Champions is a tournament. It sort of makes sense if it was the end of the group stage and it was group stage points, because, we have the 1-1 system for 1 point for a team. We have the 2-0 system for 3 points. So I started by saying, okay, well, maybe if they're in each group, maybe there will be one clear-cut team. Maybe one team will win all of its games again and go get 9 points in the group, which is the maximum number of points you can get, and it'll be clear. Or maybe, 2 teams will be tied with 7 points. We have a tiebreaker match or something like that to send somebody to All-Stars. No, came back that it was, in fact, circuit points. Now, circuit points are problematic because by April 25th, at this point, before today, I didn't even have the schedule for the Champions playoffs for this season. So I didn't even really know what exactly was going to have ended by then. But because SK Telecom T1K has 400 points and Samsung Ozone has 225, and the weird thing about Champions is that you can earn more points by going through NLB, even if you're knocked out of the quarterfinals. So it's actually not only Champions we're talking about for circuit points, but the tournament underneath it, Champions, that has to progress to a certain stage by April 25th for us to know. So basically what I had to assume was that given the 175-point difference between K and Ozone, that the only possible way for SKTK to not go to All-Stars was for them to be eliminated during the group stage, and then for the semifinals to have been finished by 425, therefore guaranteeing a minimum of 225 circuit points to Ozone if they made it that far, so they could guaranteed overtake SKTK, right? And this is of course assuming that NLB hasn't really ramped up yet, because maybe SKTK loses in groups but wins NLB, and then that's another whole other can of worms right there. But the NLB finals wouldn't have happened before that time anyway. So basically, you'd be looking at that scenario as the only scenario where SKTK wouldn't go to All-Stars. And then I got confirmation that the semis are not going to be played before 425, so that went right out the window. So I guess what I also don't understand is why Riot didn't immediately announce that SKT was going.
No, that's what seems a bit conspicuous in if that really was the plan all along, okay? Because that's the one piece of information you could give immediately. Like you could say, okay, SKT's going because of how it will work. Whoever's top of the Chinese one, they'll go. The other 3, the winners of their leagues go, okay? The reason it's bad is because when I said the premise of the tournament is awesome, if you take the All-Star name off, it is. To have the best teams of each region play a little mini tournament is great. The problem is 2 of the best regions aren't actually necessarily going to have the best. Now, I'll accept, okay, having the best in LPL, that's the best we can do if the scheduling's off, okay? But actually, listen, you can never take anything for granted in a game that's a 5-player game. Change 1 player and then have something happen in the group. Like, for all we know, the next Bonjours of League of Legends are in the group with SKTS, and who knows, maybe it's the KTA and they suddenly go crazy, and then SKTS somehow beats K, and now they do go out in the group stage. Well, they're still going to represent Korea. That's a problem. You've just ruined your own premise there. The whole point was the best teams, whereas that's the best team from how many months ago? A month and a half ago or something?
Or we're in a situation where the quarterfinals are completed. So even if SKTK does make it out of the group stage, perhaps they hit somebody and lose their quarterfinal match or something like that. There are actually multiple ways for SKTK to not be in Champion Spring by the time All-Stars rolls around.
And by the way, this isn't even bad in the sense of, like, let's say the Chinese team goes there who hasn't finished LPL yet. They go there, they lose, and then in the playoffs of LPL, they lose immediately. And so, like, they were never really the top Chinese team. That's not the worst case scenario. The worst case scenario is this. SKT goes like I say, they get out of the group stage, then they get like 3-0'd by someone. Then SKT goes to this tournament, owns everyone in the whole tournament, and now everyone's like, not only does everyone in this whole tournament suck who are the best of the other regions, but that wasn't even Korea's best teams. That's even worse. Now you've let a team who definitely wasn't the best own everyone else in your, like, mini worlds. So, I mean, I'm worried, like, the outcomes that can happen there, it gets a bit squirrely, right?
Well, I mean, to a certain degree, we can already say that sort of happened at Worlds anyway, because going back to the fact that the KT Bullets didn't manage to qualify, who were clearly the number 2 team in Korea and likely the number 2 team in the world at the time, and they didn't get to go due to the circuit point system in Korea, which I don't fully agree with. You know, we've discussed this. But I think we should have a scaling circuit point system as we get closer to Worlds like the GPL has. I actually think the GPL has the best system to send teams to Worlds right now. But yeah, looking at that, you could say, well, Naj and Blacksword, man, they were slumping. They got, they won NLB 2 seasons in a row. They got knocked out very early, and a couple seasons after their win in Winter, it had been a long time. They come to Worlds and they make the semifinals. And then they give SKTK a run for their money. And at that point, you have to ask yourself, well, this is a team that most people thought of as maybe 5th or 6th best in Korea at the time. And yeah, Samsung Ozone failed hard in that tournament. They choked. But the KT Bullets were very consistent before that, and they weren't there. So it is exactly, I think, that kind of situation you're presenting, where a Korean team that wasn't thought of as particularly high ranking at the time of Worlds went to Worlds, did very well, and then KT Bullets are just sitting at home twiddling their thumbs, wishing they were able to compete.
And let's not forget, the outcome of that, if you remember, was before the tournament, everyone agreed and complained, oh, Sword shouldn't be there. But because they played SKT well, most people who don't follow OGN were like, oh, actually, I was wrong. Sword are really good. It's like, no, it was neither. They were just sort of in the middle. And the funny thing was, next season, they didn't even get out the group, if you remember. So and they never were super good, yeah.
They didn't get out of groups in summer either.
Oh, exactly, yeah.
Neither.
That's what I mean. It actually, what's funny is you're right in a sense of what I was saying. In a way, it delegitimized Worlds. That you had a team who wasn't even top 3 in Korea, who then basically was this, you could say, the second best team in the tournament in terms of how close they played the winner. Like, that's questionable. You know what I mean? Like, they played the best team in the whole tournament, the closest. And so that, in a way, that delegitimized the concept of the World Championship,
And not only that, but in my opinion, just from the quality of the games, the series between SK Telecom and Najin Sword was the best series of Worlds.
By far, yeah. Okay, so I thought a good way to stay on this topic was to do like a hypothetical then. So I thought the first thing we could do is let's guess who we think the representatives of each region would be. It'll be harder for like the Korean and Chinese one because we haven't seen it yet, but let's try and guess anyway and see. Then people can come back to this VOD in like how many months and see if we were right. So who are we going to guess then? Let's start in NA. It's TSM, right?
Yeah, I agree. It's probably going to be TSM. I think that TSM is a very complete team right now. They show extremely good decision making, and their individual lanes are pretty strong. So, I mean, I think CLG is getting up there, but I think that TSM is still a little bit more clever than we are. So we'll see by the end of the split. But I think TSM right now. I don't think Cloud9. Cloud9 has a winning record against TSM at the moment, but I don't see Cloud9 beating TSM in a best of 5.
So, I even think it would be better for NA if TSM went, because unfortunately, Cloud9 could beat TSM for sure, and they can still win the league. But I think Cloud9 would suffer way worse versus like the Chinese team versus the Korean, who they're just gonna destroy them in lane. So
yeah, I agree.
It's hard to see how Cloud9 can win in that scenario. Whereas at least TSM, okay, Cloud9's probably strategically the best team in NA, but I don't think they have the raw mechanical skill that you need. Whereas TSM aren't as strategically good, but at least they have some of the all-star type players that could match up, So if for this sort of tournament, I think you'd even want it to be TSM, just to have the best chance. Okay, Europe. I mean, I'm just going to say Gambit, and not just because they're the top ones, just because I think they'll get. For me, it doesn't matter where Gambit finished in the regular season. In the playoffs, I think they were going to win anyway.
Yeah, and you have to look at other factors with Gambit too. Like they're getting their team house finally, so at long last, this is a team that's going to be able to live and practice together, which is obviously hugely important to a team's success, especially at this stage of League of Legends. And I consider it a pretty minor miracle that Gambit has been able to compete at the level they have for so long with their insane travel schedule and not living together and all of their other issues. So I think that Gambit is a good choice here. They also are clutch. I said this at Worlds, but everybody else was saying, Gambit's not going to do good. I was the only one on the analyst desk who picked Gambit to get out of groups, and I just know that when push comes to shove, when they need to perform, they always perform. That's it. They've been incredibly consistent in international tournaments. They're the only European team to have a good winning record against Korean teams. So
yeah.
It could be Fnatic. Fnatic could make a comeback. I like where SK is going. Maybe ROCCAT can turn around a little bit, but I think Gambit is the safe bet here.
That's the thing as well. Okay, everyone who's a Fnatic fan can just get ready to hate me already. But every single season of LCS, I don't really count those Gambit regular season results as the real results. I'm sorry, I don't give a fuck how many times your team beats Gambit and all the rest of it. There's always an asterisk there to me, which is like they have the most ridiculously insane travel schedule that no one else could handle. And yet they still always come.
Yeah, they still do great, right?
They're top of the league right now, even though they had to play one game with like 4 subs. They're still top of the league. And with the travel added in. So what would they be like without the travel? I mean, we can't speculate, but we know they're already the best.
Yeah.
That's a fucking baller.
Yeah, I'm always impressed by Gambit. And especially now they have Edward back. They're back to that crew that always kind of carried them through. I mean, I like it. I like it.
I even think, even if you take the travel thing out, the reason why Gambit has this pattern in the regular season as well is because part of the reason they're amazing at tournaments is they're not a team that like you draw it out over, like have them play 10 games in a row over these many weeks and they'll be super consistent. They're a team who does have that like peak for the one event type mentality. And if you look at their style of play, it makes sense. They aren't the team who's planned everything out and everything's strategical. It seems more like they're like intuitive. Like I've always thought they were like the ultimate example of like intuitive team play. If you even hear their comms, they're not saying shit. They just know based on each other, like they have a really good fit, you know. Well, that's not going to work. That can't be consistent. But when it's on, you're going to look fucking awesome, aren't you? Because it's unspoken what you're doing. You're going in. So to me, it makes sense as to why it goes how it is. I even think you could say the same thing I said about the NA scenario. So where I said TSM's even the better matchup for the other regions, Gambit are the better matchup because, first of all, like you said, the experience of that 5-man lineup is awesome versus your other teams. But even better, it's almost the same scenario. So I think SK are actually strategically better, like I said about Cloud9. But again, I'm worried if SK go, like, how are some of their players going to do versus like Faker, you know, that sort of a scenario? That's where I get worried. So I think it's almost the same exact scenario, you know.
Yeah, I agree. You look at a player, you look at a player like Jesus on SK, and you get a little. I think you have to be worried. Alex Ich is going to probably be more consistent in an international tournament situation. Gambit does well under pressure, so I hope Gambit goes. I think Gambit will give the best performance for Europe, but who knows how it'll work out. They've had some issues. Obviously, the Gambit, I'm a little concerned because the Gambit house is in Ukraine, and obviously Ukraine's having some serious problems right now. Although not for Russian citizens, to be fair. So maybe it'll go okay for them. I
mean, for GPL, I don't really follow that league, so I don't have an opinion on how it is. It's presumably it's Type A Assassins who are the best.
AHQ has been doing really well also, and AHQ is there's some weird strategies going on. AHQ was playing support Urgot the other day. I don't even know, man. Like what happens in GPL is very strange, and it's been difficult to predict GPL in the past because even when you think you have a strong Southeast Asian team, they'll just choke in some sort of Worlds qualifiers or something like that.
Sure. And Type A Snipers.
I don't know. Yeah, Type A Snipers, man. What a sad story for them.
No, we were all hyped and then nothing really happened. Okay, so the problem with the GPL really, like people will always claim that you can't compare the regions. As it's standing right now, let me just see if I can read your mind. I predict that you will even agree with me. People think you're a hater of NA and TSM, okay? I predict you think that the GPL representative will be the worst team of the 5 in this tournament.
Correct.
Am I right?
Yes. Yeah.
Like by a convincing margin, even if it is TSM, if it is Gambit, it has to be. I mean, I agree as well because there's nothing to suggest they wouldn't be okay unless TPA rampages this IEM next week. How can we really say that? You know. So yeah, China's the hardest to guess because they've only played.
China is really hard,
and we all thought. I thought World Elite were going to be awesome, and now they've just lost those games. So, like, I don't know where I'm going on that.
They looked really bad against OMG too. So the thing about World Elite that was kind of deceptive after the first couple of weeks of play. So we saw OMG and World Elite face the same opponents, Positive Energy, who lost Name, and then Royal, that was completely blown up, right? That had a lot of problems and had to rebuild. So both OMG and World Elite did very well against those two teams. So we were but so that wasn't really very helpful because both teams won all those games. And then when OMG and World Elite finally played each other, it was kind of a disaster. And LGD has actually proven surprisingly good against EGG, and LGD also 2-0'd World Elite. So World Elite actually, now that we've seen them play against, because that was the big question with China, right? Is who is actually good right now? Who is, after all these roster changes, after these massive shifts in the team, who is going to come in and show what they got? So after the first week, wins for World Elite, wins for OMG against the same team, doesn't give you a whole lot of information. You see the head-to-head. OMG is very, very convincing in the head-to-head. So I personally, I like OMG and EDG right now. Now, OMG is better right now because they're more complete through all phases of the game. EDG is very strange at the moment, where they lose the early game pretty hard, and their early game rotations kind of, they look very poor. But then something snaps in the mid game, and they just go crazy and just come from behind, get much better rotations going, and take leads. I think if they can figure out their early game, I think their potential upside is higher than OMG. I don't think they're going to be able to do it in time at this point. I think OMG is going to go, but EDG still has a shot, I think.
No, EDG feels like an alliance type scenario where it's like you look at the lineup and you're like, it has to be good eventually. If they just stick with this and they keep playing, it has to get good. And okay, alliance, it took them a long time to get there. That's the reason I'm using that analogy. Like, it might take you the whole season to get to where you're supposed to be. But you have to figure they're going to be top 3 at least in China. They're that good as a team, you know. But yeah, you do have to wonder. I mean, the funny thing was, when they had that first game that they played against, who was it
IG.
they played in there? Yeah, the IG one. They did the same exact thing in that game, and everyone was like, okay, if they do this again, then they're never going to... But actually, that's their MO now, is that they just do badly
really
early,
strange.
And then they win, yeah.
It's really strange to watch them play. I don't know what it is.
The upside of the China scenario?
When you have a problem like that, it is that's a problem you can fix with coaching, I think. Because obviously the team is very strong and the components are strong. There's just something about the players working together in the early game. And with a coach like Aaron, I think that they'll be able to deal with that. But
that's the way you want the problem round. Alliance had it the other way around. They were super strong in laning phase, and then they couldn't do shit once it got to the team fight.
Right. That's a really bad problem.
Oh, that's the scary one to have, isn't it? 'Cause like, what do you do?
Because that's like good solo queue play, but not good knowledge of how professional teams actually play. What I feel with EDG is that we know their mechanics are strong, but it's just their early game decision making. But their late game decision making is good. So hopefully they can understand what they're doing wrong in the early game and correct it with some speed.
The thing is, I actually think the Chinese scenario, even though we can't really predict who it'll be yet, I think that will take care of itself in as much as I think the Chinese scene is skilled enough that unfortunately we're sort of biased against it in a way that we're not in Korea. So in Korea, if we hear about a new player getting picked up to like Najin or SK Telecom, we immediately think, well, if he's been picked up by that team, even if I've never heard of him, I can trust that he must be pretty good or he's a top prospect. When we hear about that in China, because we don't have that background of like someone coming in and saying, no, he's like 7th on solo queue and he's been in this amateur team and they did this, we only hear about the top players. So we assume when OMG changes all their lineup, oh, what are you doing, you idiots? Like, oh, you've lost that guy and you've lost it. Oh, this team's going to be shit now. Well, actually, I think it'll be the same as in Korea. At least one or two of these teams, either World Elite or OMG, one of them is going to have got the right prospects. They'll finish top, and as a result, I think they'll be really strong. So I'm not that worried about if it's not EDG. It'd be nice if it was, but if it's OMG, I'll assume they're really good anyway.
OMG is still looking very strong, so I have a lot of faith in OMG still. And the nice thing too about for our criticism of Riot with the way that All-Stars has to be taken from a team with the regular season, the thing about it is that the regular season for LPL is a double round robin between 8 teams. So there's actually going to be a very large sample size. So that's 4 games between each team because they play in the OGN system of 2 games, red side, blue side, 1 for each team, 3 points for the 2-0, 1 point each for the 1-1. So I think that it's enough games, it's a large enough sample size that we will get the most consistent team and probably the favorites for the playoffs. So I have faith. I have faith in the LPL kind of sorting itself out for that time.
Well, what's funny is you could actually even make the case that, well, okay, Monte Cristo gave props to Riot there in a weird way. So I have to then give equal props, but then turn it on to Riot. And so I'll say it like this. No, I agree. But here's the problem. The LPL system actually shows what's bad about the LCS system, which is that in the spring split of 2013, if GGU had won one more game, then in this world, GGU would have represented LCS-NA in this tournament. Whereas the team who was top of the league in the regular season in LCS would have been TSM, and they would have been the best team. So actually, the LPL format gives you a much higher chance of the absolute best team being the one who represents you, because it's only going to be the league at this point, okay? So that's actually a huge plus. I mean,
that's true.
It's not possible for the sixth best team to come top, you know?
That gets into a semantics of how do you consider the best team? Is it the best team that's more consistent, or is that clutch team in the playoffs that actually gets their shit together and then moves on and has the better, deeper set of strategies for a best of 5? Because it's a very different kind of play, just playing one game or 2 games against a team every week as opposed to going for a full 5 sets. Who has the stamina to really grind it out? So
okay,
what do you mean by best? I think would be the thing there.
I think we've covered the All-Star thing about as much as we need to there. Because the thing is, the point that people will be like, why did you leave out Korea? Well, if you listen to the first part of that, there's only one team that they can send there. And since we've barely seen him fucking play in a real tournament, how can we even say how good they're going to be? Like, no one knows. We just assume they're good, and then we wait to see if they're not, okay? The way that...
You say SK Telecom isn't good?
I just don't know if they're SK Telecom.
With
agree?
Casper, you mean?
Yeah.
Yeah.
That could change everything.
I mean, they've been doing really well in Masters so far. Casper's looked good, although I am concerned about his champion pool, and his Zyra wasn't as good as his Thresh, Annie, and Sona play. So we'll see. We'll see. But I don't actually think that Mondu was as big a part of that team as other people seem to believe. And the rest of the team seems to be performing just fine. And the rest of them appear to be pretty much stronger than ever, particularly Faker and Bengi are just ridiculous right now. So... I mean, SK Telecom is, I think, no matter how you cut it, unless they have a dramatic falling out before All-Stars, they're going to enter as the overwhelming favorites.
Sure. It's just that they might not be the SK Telecom who were unbeatable, you know. You can still be number one without being that team, okay?
That's true. We also don't know if or when Mondu's going to come back, because he's technically just on hiatus right now. Yeah. So there's a possibility that by the time, 8 weeks from now when All-Stars happens, that he's back on the team. We just don't know.
I mean, the key thing about that team as well is they were so unbeatable. It's like you couldn't even find, like, what's the gap there? What's the hole that you attack? Like, what lane do they ever lose? None. And so... I mean, listen, that could open the hole now, is that maybe their bot lane just goes even or doesn't dominate the other one. So you'd think, okay, well, that gives, like, say, Imp and Matter a chance. But then Imp and Matter play on a team with Dade, so there's the mid lane gone already.
Not anymore. They play with Pawn now. Ozone switched their mid laners.
I mean, even that, I'm not really sure that's fixed things entirely. Have you see what I mean? Even someone else who has an advantage in one lane, when the other team wins every lane, you can't find the hole yet. So I'll admit, I don't think they're as good as they are because I haven't seen that they're that good, but I can't say that. And that means that this team is better. Like, no, come on. Everyone else is still second and third. So the other topic, and this is the real topic we'd planned to talk about today, okay, is ROCCAT. Because with all the other teams in Europe, okay, we'll have a chance to get to some of those on other episodes, but ROCCAT has been the most interesting team for this season because came in with such low expectations. If you remember, the original way it was set up wasn't, oh, ROCCAT must be really good. It was, wow, NIP must be really bad, that they picked this team and they got 3-0. That's what everyone thought, No one then knew that ROCCAT was going to go to the top of the league. And then initially, no one was even looking at ROCCAT's Fnatic were owning everyone. And then they kind of crept up in the middle, and that's when they took over, okay. Now they've been in free fall. I think they lost like 6 out of their last 7 or something. Now they're going down again. So for anyone who's been reading my Reddit comments over the last few months, without wanting to be like, well, I told you guys so, like, this is exactly what I said. I think I'm the only person who was like a true skeptic of ROCCAT. Everyone else was telling me from all angles, okay, no, they have the best jungler. Jankos, he's better than Diamond right now. Overpow, oh God, Overpow, he's so beautiful, he's amazing. He can play anything. He can play Teemo mid, he just own Alex Ich. Vander, best support in all of Europe. So I was like, because when we were talking about All-Stars, okay, people kept bringing these 3 names up. And people were saying, no, these are the best at all their positions, all their top 2, okay. And so they were suggesting, like, if they have 3 of the top 2 players, that's like the most talented team in Europe, right, Monte?
Yeah, well, theoretically, yes. Theoretically.
Now, as you see them in free fall now, it's not the most talented team in Europe.
Well,
come on.
You say we see them in free fall, and I agree that what's weird about ROCCAT though is that if we look at their super weak results they went 1-3, but who did they beat? They beat Gambit. I mean, they lose to Millennium and beat Gambit. It's hard to say, and SK has won all 3 games against them so far. So obviously, I think they have some weaknesses, and I think they surprised people with some unorthodox picks and some lane matchups that people weren't used to earlier on in the season. And I think that helped propel them forward early on. And I think that their risk assessment has always been really good. They are good at making calls when it comes to, they won't do 50-50s. They only do 80-20s. They play a pretty conservative play style if they see a situation developing on the map, they are very risk averse, which is interesting. But I think sometimes, having the 80-20s is good, but I think that sometimes they overanalyze things in the game and they psych themselves out when they need to go in. And I think other teams are starting to abuse that a little bit as well. And teams with good rotations that are never going to give them that 90-10 or that 80-20 are now able just to capitalize through repeated higher risk decisions.
So let's talk about it, because this is what the main topic is going to be for the rest of the show. Okay, ROCCAT. So I'll go along the lines you're going along here. Okay, strengths and weaknesses and what kind of teams are doing well against them. So the first thing to bring up is that because of how I set it up there, that I actually think the thing with their team is it was never that they had these all-star players. Like, if we take those 3 players who are the standouts on their team, okay. So let's go to Jankos first, the jungler.
Okay.
He's not like some mechanical god. He's not that sort of a jungler, you know. He's good, but I think what's funny is I think his stats get a bit inflated because his mid laner roams constantly. Like, that's the interesting thing about their team for me, is that everyone talks now about how, if you remember when Froggen was doing badly earlier on in the season and Alliance was doing badly, everyone kept saying, okay, Froggen, you've got a sick laning phase, you always out-farm the enemy, but you don't roam enough. Like, you don't roam, you don't get involved in team, you just wait and you hope that you're still alive, your team's still alive, so you can team fight at the end of the game. Well, Overpow, because of some of his weird picks, and he's just not that good a farmer anyway, he already goes into the game going, I know I'm going to be down in CS. So as a result, this guy roams all the time. He goes up to help this, do a 2v1 here, or he goes to the bot. Well, he doesn't actually go to the bot lane. It's mainly the top side of the map he goes to. The amount of kills they get just above the river on the mid is like ridiculous. They get them all the time there. And so it's almost like they have a different approach to mid, because they're just trying to play almost like the Soaz of mid lane. I'm always trying to pick like a weird counter or something you don't play against, and as a result of that, I'm never trying to beat you in lane. I'm just trying to like do the weird thing that you've never expected for, and I'm just trying to contribute to my team. What do you think of this aspect?
I think it's a really silly way to play League of Legends. I mean, I'm a big kind of hardliner on playing meta champions and playing standard picks. Picks that are powerful, because there's a reason why these picks are powerful. Usually they're versatile in multiple compositions. They have numbers or certain abilities that make them good in certain metagames. And because you can play them, they go even or better in a lot of lane matchups. It's just, if you look at a pick like Gragas or Ziggs, this fits in so many different team compositions. There's nothing weird about it. It has a versatility to its style of play. You can play aggressively, you can play defensively, but when ROCCAT's out there and they're picking mid Mordekaiser, it's a very binary champion, right? It just pushes the lane. You can't do anything else with Mordekaiser. So it makes the play itself of that team predictable, and that's really problematic for them. And it also just takes extra practice to play this weird champion that Mordekaiser doesn't play like any other champion, right? If I play Ziggs and I play Orianna and I play Gragas, sure, there's subtleties to all these champions, but what's the same? They all have spells that sit on the ground. They're zone mages. They're range zone mages. They create zones around turret in a very similar way. So there's crossover with the skill. There's crossover to the way you play these champions. Mordekaiser's fucking weird, and it only does one thing. It draws a lot of jungle pressure, but he's got no escapes. And I just don't get why they do this stuff. And they've also picked Varus during Super Week. Varus is really not a good champion right now because of his immobility. So he just gets caught out too easily. His ult is too difficult to hit. And if you don't hit your ult with Varus, your team is screwed. So I would love to see. And if we look at the game they played against Gambit when they won this past week, guess what their team composition was? Elise, Renekton, Caitlyn, Gragas, Thresh. Wow, a standard team comp. Why don't they just do this more often? Because they've proven they can take down the #1 team in EU with a standard team comp, but play Mordekaiser mid against Millennium? Well, fuck, they lose. So I think part of it is their pick process, and I don't think they're focused enough on playing meta-specific champions and getting better with that. And you talk about Overpow. Oh, well, the assumption that you say that perhaps his mindset is, I'm going to go into this laning phase, and maybe I'm going to fall behind early. So he wants to pick this weird counter instead of, and so he has to practice Mordekaiser a ton, right? Just to get the Mordekaiser ready for LCS. And then he loses with it, and he could have been spending that time practicing on meta champions and getting better in laning phase so the scenario doesn't exist in the first place.
The funny thing is, though, because I promised everyone I'd do my research before this, because usually I know a little bit. I don't know what I'm talking about, okay? So when I watched all these games, I was looking for trends, okay? That's like usually been my strength in games. I look for like the patterns and then what's different when they win and they lose. And one thing I noticed, okay, was that I think this is the reason why they're in free fall for me. Because the reason I describe it like that is I don't think they're going to recover. I don't think they're going to be top 2 at the end of the regular season. I think in the playoffs, I'll be surprised if they make it into the top 3, okay? I think they're going to be like a 4th or a 5th, that sort of team.
I'd say 4th would be my guess.
So the reason I describe it like that is I think the free-for-all is like everyone catching up and figuring out how to play them, okay? And so what I noticed that was an interesting trend, I kept looking at the games they win, the games they lose, what's banned against them in the games they win, and what's banned against them in the games they lose. And what I noticed was, because Overpow was all the hype was around Overpow in those first few weeks. Because if you remember, not only were they winning every game, but because he was playing such a wide champion pool, it looked like people are trying to figure out, like, what are we banning against Overpow? Okay, he beat Nip with Kale, so we got to ban Kale against him. No, wait a minute, Pantheon. Ban Pantheon because he played that a few times. And then ban, what else do we ban? But everyone bans Kassadin, but you know what I mean? Like, they're banning all these mid-champions. And I noticed in the winning game, in the games that they win, that's when people ban mid champions against. When you ban Kale and you ban Pantheon, they win those games because he never planned on. They weren't his best champions. He's playing fucking random shit and doing weird shit with it. So it doesn't matter what he plays, and he's not trying to win his lane. He's not going to own you by out CSing you and getting more items that way. He's going to win by helping out in fights and then just use it like using Kale's invulnerability on people and shit like that. So the funny thing was, you actually lose by thinking that Overpow is faker and trying to ban him out. Okay. And the funny thing as well was, if you looked at, okay, so go to the other stars, Jankos, okay. Jankos's best champions were Elise and Lee Sin. Well, first of all, everyone's banning Elise anyway, because it's like the fucking OP jungle champion. And in general, you're going to probably occasionally ban Lee Sin anyway, so that those are already standard bans. That's not like a focus ban that you're doing on him. And then the weirdest one for me was... the one champion people never actually thought to try and focus ban, because the 3 stars look like, okay, I'll keep it in order so it makes sense here, okay. So the other stars, Vander, okay. Now Vander has been doing all his work, or every game they've won was him on Thresh or Morgana. And so on Thresh, he looks like amazing when he hits all those hooks. People ban Thresh anyway, that doesn't even matter. That's not like a focus ban. And then Morgana, he has lost some games on Morgana as well. So again, that's the mistake people made. They looked at the 3 stars and they were like, how do we ban these ones? And so part of the way they were trying to ban Jankos actually was he used to play Pantheon as well. And that was like another trick that Overpow could do. Okay, he could play Pantheon mid, or you could have Pantheon jungle. So again, you're making the mistake of trying to ban the stars. But to me, they're not a star team. They're a team where like each person has like a pretty good synergy and role with the others. The real trick, here's the funny thing, is to ban the other 2 players that I didn't mention who aren't the stars. Because Xaxus has something ridiculous like fucking like 7-to-1 win ratio on Renekton, right? And then his other champions are just okay. You know how many times they've banned Renekton against Xaxus? Just once. Ever. How can anyone not have noticed that trend?
I'm looking at the picks and bans right now. Millennium banned this last week.
How can no one have noticed that trend, though? He's like, let me see what the stat was. Okay, he's 5-to-1 on Renekton. His next best champion, he's 2-1 on Mundo, and he's 3-3 on Trundle. Like if you're the analyst there, Monte, the first thing we do after I've explained it like that, where there's no one else you can focus ban, is like, well, let's figure out a way to get a Renekton ban in there at least. Let's at least have him try to play Trundle and make it a winning record, or play Mundo and play more than 3 games on it, you know. And then the other guy who you want to ban out, here's the funny thing, is you want to put some bans onto Saleva, because he's like the least impressive guy on their team, right? Because he has this beastly support player. So he looks like, well, all your kills, mate, come from your support who has 10 assists, who's hooking people into you, and you're just killing them. You don't look any good. Dude, their AD carry has played 5 champions this whole season, and 3 of those he's only played 4 times in total. He's played Caitlyn and Lucian, let me see, 16 times in LCS Spring. So here's an idea. If you want to spend some bans, Caitlyn or Lucian, maybe?
Especially because Caitlyn and Lucian are very safe picks for the laning phase. So
especially if you go with Thresh all the time.
Yeah, exactly. So I think that taking those out and forcing him onto a shorter range or less mobile champion like Jinx.
Yeah. He's only played Jinx once and he lost on it.
Yeah.
And he played Varus and he lost on that.
It's also weird to me that ROCCAT doesn't play Sivir, but
that's because I don't think that guy's very good.
So I don't think he could survive a laning phase on Sivir. It's obviously, if you play Sivir and you get into a Sivir versus Caitlyn matchup, it's difficult. It's a difficult lane.
I mean, it's one of those scenarios where it's actually, I'll use it in a sports analogy, okay? So in basketball or a sport like that, there's 2 approaches you can play defensively on people, okay? You either focus everything on the star player and try and shut him down, okay? And think, well, he's the guy who scores the 40 points. So instead of 40, I want him to score 30 this game. And you go so hard on him, you can probably guess what's going to happen here, that your defensive coverage on the other players isn't as good. And so what's funny is you get the amazing player. You have to work night and day, but you finally get him down to the 30 points. Here's the problem. If he's a good player, he then passes the ball, and some guy who you could have covered quite easily scores 20 points, and that's what really wins the game, okay? So the other approach, and this is what the really good teams do, they don't go crazy on the star player. They try to play the bad players as hard as possible, because those guys, not only do they do worse, they crumble, because they're used to being open, and they're used to missing even when no one's guarding them, you know? So the equivalent is what I'm describing here. Xaxus and Celiver are the people you can shut down and you can push off champions, where at the moment they have like 2 champions that they're good on. So push them off those champions, they're immediately taken out of the game. The others aren't even playing 1 champion and owning on it anyway, so you couldn't stop them anyway. So really the only defensive strategy against ROCCAT is to do this, is to ban out the 2 players who actually really need those comfort picks. And the reason I'm bringing this point up, right, is because we talked at the beginning, okay, SK is their kryptonite. SK's won 3 times against them. Well, if my premise at the beginning was wrong, and ROCCAT really does have these mechanical beasts who are going to be the best player at their position, then SK wouldn't be the team beating them, okay? It would be Fnatic, it would be Alliance. These would be the teams dominating them, because these are the only teams who could match up skill-wise to go along with the strategy. SK, skill-wise, might be like the 5th best team in LCS, but strategically, they're the best. And so it's the equivalent of C9 beating you. They're not beating you from people going ham on you with skills. Yeah. You know? They're out conceptualizing you. And so SK is beating you by better decision-making, the right picks, the right bans, and just playing each lane correctly. Like, actually, I think the reason... Do you want to go into this? What do you think of SK versus ROCCAT?
I think it's a really interesting... I think it's a really interesting matchup, and I really like what they've been doing with the Kayle support as well, because it makes them less vulnerable to the picks and the roams coming out of Fnatic, or coming out of ROCCAT rather. So I think that you look at SK plays with a lot of speed. Their last match they played with Sivir and Lulu, so they're highly mobile. They're able to deal with any pick attempts with the invulnerability offered by the Kayle support. And they're playing more carry-oriented top laners as well. And when you play Jax, and if your theory holds true, and I think that there's a lot of merit in it, that Xaxus maybe not the best top laner, if you can get him Jax into a situation where he gets farm in the early and mid game, well, you can just carry late, right? You're abusing a top lane matchup. When you play Jax, you're inherently trying to abuse the enemy top laner, because you're hoping that you can get through the laning phase where you can carry late, right? And a good top laner and a good jungler are not going to let you do that. But that's what's been happening.
The funny thing is, again, when I was thinking of trends, when I'm watching the games they win, the games they lose, thinking of what you're describing here, their strengths, like getting these picks, not just taking picks like Fnatic style, where you go like, right, we got this guy now, everyone just going on him, and we're better than them, so we'll get the pick. It's like we got a pick and it's favorable, now everyone going okay. So they're strategically looking for when it's worth doing it. I'm amazed that teams like well, I guess Alliance are fucking shit in the late game, so that's why they didn't do it. I'm amazed that Fnatic and Gambit, etc., didn't recognize this trend and just go, you know what we do? Don't take any of the small risks that we take versus other teams to get a little edge. Play as safe as possible, take no risks, get to the late game, and then win the 2 team fights that then win a really low kill game, and that's how you win. Because when I looked at the wins and losses, okay, in the games they lose, they get half as many kills. And yet the games they win and they lose usually last almost exactly the same average length of time. So that immediately tells you they're not super duper skilled. They win by beating you with decision making, okay? They're stacking up tiny advantages. So what you do versus a team like that, if you're Fnatic, is you play super safe, get to the end of the laning phase, then you just win your one team fight where you're more skilled. And they don't want to 5v5 anyway. They 5v5 after they've got you with the little grinding down. Then they can make up for the fact they're less skilled and that maybe they have less farm on the mid lane, etc. If you play this way, say you play super safe, well then how does Overpow picking Mordekaiser and doing this stupid shit, or picking Kale and not having enough CS? Now he's fucked versus Alex Ich versus Xpege, who are just monsters. Yep. This is the trend. And so if anyone else, I'm guessing the teams have figured this out, by the way, by the fact they're winning. But I don't see. Here's the problem. I described this to someone actually when ROCCAT were on top. I said the reason I'm skeptical about ROCCAT being on top is because, one, it's because the best teams are losing, because Fnatic and Gambit were losing. Secondly, Alliance is terrible when we think they should be good. And then I looked at who were they winning, and yeah, they've beaten Gambit, etc. But in general, they're beating the bad teams. So if this trend continues, what will happen is when Gambit and Fnatic rise up and Alliance come to their level, now Alliance and ROCCAT are a similar level, SK, Gambit, and Fnatic are above them. They're still beating the bottom teams, Copenhagen Wolves, these shit teams down here. So yeah, that puts them 4th or 5th. That's where they should be. So it's not that they've done super well or super badly. This is where they should be. They've hit their cap. Okay, I don't see how they go higher. Thoughts?
I mean,
am I wrong?
I think no. I think it's hard to argue with you in this scenario, and just based on the results so far. Now, there have been a lot of weird accusations too that a lot of people are saying like, oh, you know, ROCCAT's the new MYM, and I don't think it's going to be that bad, because the thing about ROCCAT, and I think that where it differentiates them from MYM, is that ROCCAT is actually plays the game from my perspective at a more intelligent level. They're more cohesive. They understand risk and they understand how to get these small advantages. And against teams, like as a professional team, that's the peak, right? That's what differentiates the most between professional play and solo queue. And so I feel like ROCCAT's always going to be a team that can abuse solo queue stars, abuse upcoming amateur teams that have these solo queue gods that come in, because they're just not going to be used to playing against that. And I think it will make ROCCAT pretty consistent in the long run. But do they have as high of an upside? No, and maybe they're getting a little bit exposed for that right now.
Well, I mean, look at the teams they beat, okay? So the teams they were trashing earlier in the season, Alliance and Millennium, these are the two teams where we all know they have all the talent individually, but they can't work together. So they're the solo queue players. They're not really, because they're experienced players, but they're playing like solo queue players. So they're beating those teams, and then the other teams they beat is Super Hot Crew and Copenhagen Wolves. Now these teams...
They are 1 and 2 against Copenhagen Wolves, to be fair.
Okay, sure. Well, actually, Copenhagen Wolves have a few players who I think have exceeded expectations. But the point is, I mean, when I look at their team... Okay, give me your perspective first. Go down their team man for man. So start top lane, jungler, mid. Give me like your rough sense of where do they stack up? Who's really actually like, is anyone top 2 out of any of the positions? Where do you really see them? What do you see of Xaxis?
No. Like you're saying, too limited champion pool. It's not really, there's not really anything there.
He's not bad. He to me, he's just like a standard solid top laner.
Yeah,
this is the better for him.
Fine. He's fine. He just his champion pool seems like it's a little bit too limited. I mean, we touched on this a little. It's hard to tell in the current top lane meta though whose champion pool is limited, because you only have to play 3 champions in top at the moment to get by. I think Jankos is actually pretty good. I'll give it to him. He may be a little bit limited in champion pool as well, but I think his mechanics are good enough that I think he has a high upside and can improve. Do I still think that he's a top 2 jungler in Europe? Probably not. It's hard to say, though. Cyanide's been slumping a little bit, so I mean, I think Diamond is still number 1. I think that's been the case forever and will continue to be the case for a long time. Yeah, Overpow, weird picks. I'm not a fan of weird picks for weird picks' sake. I think that's the wrong mentality to go into a game with. And you look at all the other great mids in Europe, and the problem is that Europe is a region that's always been stacked with exceptional mid lane talent. So it's hard to stand out in a pool where you're dealing with Xpeke and Alexic and Froggen and Calibre, no, not really. And Vander maybe. I think Vander and Jankos are the players I think you can really point to and say maybe this guy is I wouldn't say top 2, but maybe top 3. Maybe. But so, I think I'm still not sold on any of this, right? I'm still not sold on any of it.
So I'll give you like some of the thoughts I'd had on some of these players. So first of all, let's go to Jankos first, because I think after Overpow, that's the order that they sort of stood out in, as I remember. Overpow, obviously, in the middle to begin with anyway. Everyone saw him.
He was surprising. That's the thing about Overpow was he surprised people.
So if we go to Jankos, now the strange thing about Jankos is, first of all, I'm trying to think how to describe it. To me, he's not that super mechanically. He's good. Like, I'm trying to think how I'd rank him. I'd probably have him like 4th best jungler in Europe. I think that's fair. 4th, maybe fighting for 3rd, depending on how Cyanide's doing. Because the problem I see for Jankos is, when I looked at all the SK games that they lost, every time Svenskeren like went in on fucking Jankos and always out-jungled him, always beat him. And the whole thing of Svenskeren is, he's not like the Diamond Procs genius who knows where to go all the time. He just wins with like mechanics. That's the Svenskeren skill, okay? It's having sick mechanics. And so if he's totally dominating you, that suggests to me that you can't be one or the other. You can't either be a super mechanical beast or you'd be a bit more even. And you can't also be a super genius because you could exploit the fact that he's so mechanically one-dimensional, you know?
Or that he's playing so aggressively.
Yeah. I mean, that's just the way it tends to play out in like game theory approach there, okay? So I'll give Jankos I'll give him like that status of like maybe he's like the 4th best, fighting for 3rd. That's still pretty good, by the way, for a brand new team in LCS.
Yeah,
Overpow. See, what's funny is with these 3-star players, I'm not going to diss any of them. I'm going to say they're all good, but just not as good as people think, but good in a unique way. So with Overpow, here's where I'll give him props. He's found like a new way to play mid that in some way is effective that I couldn't have actually thought of before he did it. Because everyone else in Europe, which is like okay, so here's what Europe is like. You know when like a little kid says like, what would win, a lion or a tiger? And then would a bear kill the tiger? Now, if a little kid could really do it, they'd get those animals. Like, you know, like the Japanese did it, I think, on some game show years ago, you know, like horrendous human rights type shit. They just actually put animals and had them fight each other and saw who won or whatever. That's what Europe is like at mid, okay? We just get like these beasts, and then we're like, you want to play mid, bro? Right, well, either you can kill that beast or he's going to kill you. So everyone else in Europe had 2 approaches. Either they were like Nuke Duck, and they were like, well, no, you just don't know it, but I'm a beast, and I'm going to kill Xpeke, okay, straight up, 1v1. Or you had to play like Schleier and Ocelot, and you had to go, okay, I know I'm not a beast like that guy is. So my only approach is I'm not even going to try and take any. I just want to go even here. I'll stay in the lane, try not to die, try and go in my tower, just farm. Overpow found a different approach. He was like, I know I'm not a beast. I know I can't play like 2 champions and dumpster everyone. So I have to play all the weird champions that everyone doesn't play. And thus doesn't have a really good... They'll be able to farm against them because some of these champions can't even farm. But they won't know how to play me. Can they go in on me? Do they attack me now? Then, because they're thinking to themselves, well, I'm just going to out-CS this guy. I won't even be in lane sometimes. I'm just going to pop off over here while he thinks, well, great, free waves for me. I'm just taking all this mid. So he's found a way to sort of hybridize, not going to play even, but making it work. The problem with that style is that style can't work forever. That style, every gimmick style runs out eventually.
It's inherently countered by just conservative play, like you're saying too. As long as you just play safe and you don't give him any opportunities, if you know he's going to roam, all you have to do is sit back and take the CS, and everybody just stands next to their turret. Yeah. Or you play champions with high amounts of escape in lane, or you play champions with teleport that can just counteract his ganks immediately. There's a lot of counterplay to that. And I agree. And this is my problem with weird champs, is that playing non-meta, it's like it has a timer on it, right? Before people figure your shit out and then like find a way to counter it. We've seen this across regions too. Because remember in Champion Spring, when Blaze was really good, like kind of because they lost towers quickly, like they figured out how to lane freeze and all this other stuff, and they're like, whatever, Flame's just gonna play Rise and stand under the turret and second tier turret, and then we're gonna wait for 20 minutes and Flame's gonna show up and just kill everybody. And then they went on a 13-game winning streak in Champions. And then they came to the finals, and everyone thought Blaze was going to win, myself included. And Ozone came in, and they knew exactly how Blaze was going to play because Blaze only played one way. And Dade played Zed and just walked down to tier 2 turret and just repeatedly just like farmed Flame. So there was a big hole to this strategy where if you played assassins against them and you warded up their jungle and you prevented this freeze from happening in the first place. So the weird style is weird, and it's not common because it's usually not optimal, but you're relying on your opponents not knowing how to deal with it. So these strategies have a timer. Sometimes it's a long time. Sometimes it's a very short amount of time before people figure you out. And I think you're right. If you play conservatively against ROCCAT right now, well, you're probably going to do a little bit better in terms of overall results. Especially because I always feel like actually people diminish Soaz because he gets the same gimmick applied to him, which is that he just plays weird champs. No. The reason Soaz is amazing is he plays the champ that he's played once, but really well. It's not that he just plays weird champs. Anyone can fucking lock it in on the selection screen. He can actually play all those champs and then like out-trade you in the lane and know the limits of it. That's why he's a fucking genius. Add in the second part of that, not just that he plays the champs okay. He's actually like an outlier. That's the reason why most people can't do that okay. So I'll just say that for Overpow. And then for Vander, Vander's the one I'm sold on actually. I think Vander's legit, except, like I said, every game they've won, he's been on 2 champs, Morgana and Thresh. Now, what he's sick at is landing the hook and then landing the fucking Dark Binding. That's what he's really, really good at. But then again, I can't tell entirely how good he is. He's obviously, I think he actually might be like a top 3 support in Europe, maybe even top 2. He's the one I'm really sold on. I think he really is good. But then again, in all the games I see they're winning, Jankos just ganks bottom over and over, and they do 3v2s, or that when, say they're playing, but that fits that support style of champion, right? Yeah. When you're going to have that hard CC and you're going to be able to make picks from a distance, support champion, then it's fine. It also synergizes well with Overpow's roaming, right? Because you want champions who can create picks from a distance, and so that style of support really fits in. The question that I have is, maybe we'll see this in the future, but there are a lot of support champions you can do this on right now. Zyra's coming back up as well. And my question is, will we see Vander playing some more Zyra in the future as a possible alternate pick to what he's already been selecting?
Well, here's the interesting thing as well. Because like I said, he's won every game on those 2 champs. What happens when people actually do focus ban someone like him just for 1 game? What does he go to then? Like, he doesn't play. He's played Annie. I think he's lost every Annie game he's played. He's never played Leona ever. So he's not even playing some of the other champions that you're seeing in this position. So again, it's hard to give someone too much credit when they don't have the success over a wider champion pool. Because let's face it, the mistake people who are fans make over and over in League of Legends is looking at who's the best in this meta now and then forgetting the part of this meta now and saying, no, they're just the best. Right. The reason why Alex Ich and the reason why Alex Xbeck and the reason why Froggen are gods is because you could like take all the champions, jumble them up in a bag, throw 10 out on the floor, and they'll find 3 that they can play and be good on. Other people can't do that, you know. They rise and fall. That's the thing that I have repeatedly said in Masters about Casper, the new support for SK Telecom K, is that every time we introduce him, I'm like, we know this guy.
I've seen him for his entire career. He was on Jin Air Stealth beforehand. I know this player. He started out as a support Kayle main, which was weird at the time. It's still weird, but it was particularly weird at the time. Then he just played Thresh and Sona forever. And so I know he's good at Thresh and Sona. And then we saw him play one game as Annie. He did very well. But then this last week, he was forced onto Zyra because I kept saying, why aren't teams banning out? Why don't they just ban out Casper and see what the hell happens? Because there's been no other effective strategy against SK Telecom. And he played Zyra, and he had some. They weren't bad, and they weren't good either. Some very mediocre games on Zyra, and he made a lot of mistakes, actually. And the thing about Mondu was that Mondu could play an enormous number of support champions. And so I think that the jury's still out on Casper, and I said that repeatedly. And I think that people, in the comments that I've been seeing about SK Telecom and what I've been seeing about Casper, is that people have been too willing to say that he is just as good as Mondu. Now, I don't think that they need a player who's just as good as Mondu to continue crushing, because I don't think that's actually Mondu's performance was not the ultimate reason why SKTK was successful. In fact, I think that Mondu was probably the least important person on that team, in a way. But
it was a nice backup to have your worst player is a super sick top 2 in the world support, though. That's kind of what made their team monsters, right?
Of course,
and
that's
one guy
the
can take the game off and they still win.
That's the thing about Mondu too, is he was always meta. He would learn new champions very quickly. He would constantly debut champions in a style like Alistair or Leona that I had never seen him play before. Like his Leona play was spectacular, and I had never really seen him as a Leona player, and he never really fit that profile to me because he was always more about staying back at range. But then you remember this guy also used to play Mordekaiser support and LeBlanc support, and he won games doing that too, that his champion pool was just enormous, and it's a great player. But I think they'll be fine with Casper, but I hesitate for all the reasons we've had in this conversation of just because SK Telecom is still winning and looking extremely dominant, and just because Casper is like a top 5 challenger player in Korea, doesn't mean that he's top 2 in Korea at his role. And I don't think he is right now at all. I mean, if you look at Mata and Mafa right now, I don't think Casper's up there with them.
Because that's the other thing as well, is that even though I've said that I think Vander's the best, I actually think he's pretty legit. Like every game I watched, even some of the ones he was losing, he's the one player who almost never did badly okay. Like his idea of a bad game was just a game where like he went 0-1-1. That was like a bad game for him. Where if you're the support and you still don't ever die, that's not bad. But when SK would beat them in all these games, SK's bot lane is like the smartest, I think, at the moment. Bearing in mind, Genji and Edward are still a little bit off. Like I think they just go through waves, you know. Sometimes they're good, sometimes they look like they don't know who the fucking the other guy in the lane is. But Candy Panda and N-Rated have been like the revelation in their bot lane this season. And so Candy Panda's made the Calibre guy just look like average every time he plays him. And then N-Rated, I mean, I'm pretty sure this Vander guy must be mechanically better than him because he's just so good on the mechanical champs, but N-Rated has the right approach. So I think any team who wants to beat ROCCAT, think about the ban thing we described there. Don't waste bans on Kayle and shit like that in mid when he might not even pick it anyway, because his approach isn't, I'm going to pick Kayle every time. Just look at their bot lane and figure out how you make Vander ineffective.
Look at the kind of champions that N-Rated has been playing against Vander. You talk about him perhaps not wanting to go. He doesn't want to play Annie. He doesn't want to play Leona. In fact, that's what N-Rated's going to play. Who does he play? He plays Kayle, where you have a toggle E for range damage. You have a targeted slow, no skill shots, right? You have a targeted heal and speed boost, and you have a targeted invulnerability. Kayle is a very low mechanical champion to play. No skill shots, no questions. You make somebody invulnerable at the right time. It's a timing. Kayle is like the epitome, one of the top champions in terms of rewarding decision making over mechanics, right? So that he's been doing well with it.
And the funny thing was, so many of the games that they would win, when Overpow would play the Kayle, which is the most famous champ for him, partly because of what he did to Nip, that's all he would do. He would win the team fight by getting one of the tankier people, so usually the jungler, because sometimes Jankos would play like Pantheon or occasionally Gragas or something like that. He'd get the jungle, or at least he'd get this, or he'd get Zaxxas, and he'd just wait the right time in the team fight to put the invulnerability on them, who were already super tanky, and then people would actually waste time attacking them, like while they were invulnerable. And so this is like basic stuff where I sometimes wonder, I think LCS has been the slowest to pick up analysts, you know? A couple of the teams have them, but it's not like in NA, I think almost every team now has an analyst, right?
Yeah.
Some of the EU teams don't, dude. They're used to just winning by like, if you lose to someone, you go, right, what did we do wrong there? Right, just do it right next time. Some of them just look like they haven't even looked at these trends, you know? Because some of these trends, some of them stand out. Like, it's not like these are things where this will only work once against this team. This is stuff where even if the first time you try it, it doesn't work, you're going down the right path now. You're just going to have to tweak it a bit, and then you're going to be onto the right way to defeat that guy and to neutralize this guy and to make him less effective.
Yeah. I mean, it's important. And what's interesting, too, is that I think what's most interesting to me about analysts in Europe is that Gambit still doesn't have a coach. They've got Groove, they've got a manager, but they don't have they have no gameplay coach or analyst going for them right now. And it's impressive that they've been able to do as well as they have without any kind of person to work on feeding, like improving their play or feeding them information when everybody else is definitely heading in that direction.
People know I love Gambit, okay? So this is going to sound like the ultimate fanboy statement, okay? If you just took Gambit as it is right now, gave them an analyst, and his job, okay, he only gives them advice on what to do in the first 10 minutes of the game. That's all he tells them. So he tells Genja and Edward, when you're in these sorts of situations, this bot lane duo that you're playing against now, don't go in on them here because that's when the jungler always counter ganks if they're at that point. Or if they're at this point of the brush, just stay even, just farm. Don't try and get the kill, Edward, because if you do, you're probably going to get first blood. If they just told them the very simple opening stuff like this, scouting report basically, nothing intense, that addition would make Gambit like, I won't be ridiculous, I'll say 10% better, okay? And I already think they're the best. The reason why I say that is because I actually have an example from Counter-Strike of a team that was just like Gambit. So there was a team, okay, this Polish team of players. And Poland was never famous for having star players, by the way. They had one really great player. The rest were just good players, okay? They never had any history of top teams. But this team won the most major tournaments ever. Like the World Cyber Games, ESW. They won the most of those titles. But they weren't the most consistent. Like if you put them in the whole tournament circuit, like they would play the 10 tournaments a year, they'd only win the majors. So you see the trend that's emerging here already. They peak just for the major tournament. And then here's the reason why they're not consistent, like Gambit. Because their whole style wasn't based on understanding strategy really in depth. They had the perfect mix of 5 players. Oh, what is this? It's seen the pattern sort of emerging here. Not only that, even their style of play was predicated on intuitive team play. And what I mean by that is there's a sort of team play where we decide, me and you are going to play a game, okay? And so we decide beforehand, right, this is the way we want to play, okay? If I go in first, like N-rated and Candy Panda, okay, if I go in first, you'll sort of lag behind me a bit, but then I'll give you the cue as to when I want you to come in now. And then, okay, I didn't like the way that worked next time. So you give me like a different signal. And also like we'll go in at this time of the clock, like 7:24 or whatever. That's like a strategical approach to like a system of how it's going to work. The Gambit approach is more like just free flow. It's almost like an art form, you know. It just sort of works or it doesn't. And they don't have a, if it doesn't work, they don't have a gear to get it back in gear. They have to hope it works. This was the same with this Counter-Strike team. What they would do is in Counter-Strike, they would just play the game so that they got into 2v2 situations over and over. And then in 2v2, their team play would be so intuitively brilliant that they didn't have to communicate and they would beat the other 2 players. Because the other 2 players would be trying to work normally, you know, like, oh, he's over there. They'd just play and natural synergy was so good, that's how they'd win. So they sort of forced themselves into their sweet spot of these, where that would be the biggest advantage when there's only 2 of you on each team. Well, think about Gambit. Gambit can get behind 5k gold every game, and they're not worried because they're like, well, once it gets to the team fight, you know, Alex knows he just knows, like, I wish we had their comms for every game because people don't realize that they're not giving these brilliant comms where Alex is like, I will go in 7 seconds. Edward, please stun him. They're not saying any of that shit. He just knows when to do it. Or he doesn't know when to do it. He does it totally wrong and they fucking lose the team fight. So the reason I've made this example here is to show you that Gambit aren't even hitting their potential. Like you don't want to, that's why I said I'd only give them the first 10 minutes analyst, because I don't want to take away their strength. The problem now is they're leaning on their strength like a crutch. And so they're letting themselves get behind the 3K going, don't worry, we'll turn it around in the tip. You can't be playing like that. You want to be even. And then at the end, when you have the super team fight, that puts you over the top and you win every time, you know. Like, what do you think on this topic? You've seen a Gambit play a lot of games over the years.
I mean, I agree. And I think that Gambit would probably benefit really quite a bit from a coach or from an analyst, just for, I think, probably more the little things, because I think that Groove is really a good emotional center for that team and does a really good job of managing them. They just need somebody to do some more specific review and give some of the more minor tips, especially on rotations. How much work on comms they need, I don't know, because like you're saying, one of the things is that they are intuitive. Personally, from my coaching style and my opinion of the game is that I'm all about I'm going to come here in 7 seconds and we're going to initiate this way, and really heavy comm that's very technical and kind of clipping down communication so that it's as efficient as possible. And that's a style. And I appreciate the intuitive style as well. The thing is that intuitive players typically don't need coaching in that regard. Yeah. It's my opinion that all professional teams would benefit from comm streamlining and from increased comm if they're overly intuitive. But you also don't want to confuse the player. So I suppose it is I think overall that you got to go in there, you got to mess with the comms, and I think a coach or a more dedicated analyst would be good for Gambit. And I do think that it also is frustrating, I think, for an intuitive team when they start playing poorly, because frequently they don't know why. Right?
Well, we said this with Fnatic last week.
Yeah, there's
when Fnatic started losing, now it's like, well, we were winning just on instinct, you know.
Well, we had this conversation too, where I told you about Hotshot's quote about CLG, where it's like they're just like animals; they're just going on instinct. Yeah. They don't know why anything, and so that's what I really focused on, was the why. And then once they understood the why, I think that we can objectively agree that since the period where CLG understood the why, rotations have improved. I think we can say CLG is a much better team now than they were at the start of this split. Of course, part of it, a large part of it is getting Dexter in there and everybody in the right position finally. Of course, there are many factors that went into that. But I think that the level of game knowledge and rotation shown by the team is a result of improved macro knowledge from the players and improved communication. And I think that any League of Legends team can benefit from this. And I think I will go so far as to say that I think that it is now mandatory. We've gone through phases of League of Legends, just like you go through any phase of esports with a game on the rise, where it was starting to be played by amateur players who didn't have a team house. And then we saw the teams with the team houses. Man, the teams that got into a house and living together first, wow, they started to do really well. You know, they started to win everything. TSM, of course, in North America, very famous for that, for having that early team house and then dominating through most of Season 2 in North America. And the only time they were really slowed up was by Korean teams who were also living in team houses, right? When Blaze came over and, took the belt to them. But now... So, and then there were a lot of players that were saying, well, and then they dropped their jobs. So you had to do the game full time. You had to live in a team house together. Well, it kind of came, you have to do the game full time. Then the players who were playing full time, well, they were the ones who were doing well, of course. Then it was the players who were living in game houses. But now we're at a point where how can you, as a team, do all of the research and have all the focus on comms or these macro strategies? And now we're seeing the teams that have coaches or dedicated coaching staffs and multiple managers. These are the teams that are becoming more successful. And I think it's becoming mandatory to have these things right now. And Gambit is still doing well, but I think that Gambit is an anomaly. And I still think that they're, like you're saying, they're overly intuitive. They're not thoughtful enough about the way that they play the game. And if you can't identify why you're losing or why you're not as strong as you used to be, then you need to have somebody on the team who can, basically.
Well, what's funny
I think
is
that's just the way everything has gone in League of Legends and will continue to go.
When I gave the example of that team, it's because I have so much experience from Counter-Strike. I know a lot of the styles of the teams, and because it's a 5v5 game, some of these things translate okay. Well, in Counter-Strike, you could even define it like that, okay? There were two approaches you could have. One is you could have a very strict system where you've decided in advance, I think this is the best tactical system. So now what I do is I try and get players, I either mold them to what this position needs, this one here, or I find a player who fits in there. And so now I have a system for how to recruit, how to mold my team. And once I have the system in place and everyone understands the system and their role within it, now I'm going to have a framework where I can build from that. I understand like the blueprint of where we're going here. The other approach, the intuitive approach, when it works really, really well, is incredible, because how can you even play against it? You don't understand what's happening. The players themselves don't necessarily, but it's very, very rare. The difference with that is it's lightning in a bottle. It's like with Edward. You have to have the 5 players. Put even one different player in there and it might not work, you know. Well, the funny
totally
thing was,
agree with you.
when you had this scenario between the two styles, it's that you could never decide to have the intuitive. That just happened or it didn't. Okay. The difference with this style, the system, is that the system can be applied to almost any team. And so what I found was the teams who had the system but not as good players, they could be much better than equally good players who were trying to use an intuitive system that didn't work properly. Because what happened is the system over here meant that even when my players aren't on fire, because they understand why they're not winning and what to do next, they can make themselves more consistent just in that sense. They can win strategically.
Absolutely.
That's why the really great teams strategically, they win the games even when they're not on fire. Because what they do is they figure out the small little thing that I'm doing wrong now that either makes me better in the next 5 minutes, or the small thing that can cut the ground back, okay? So one of the reasons I always thought that Gambit was so up and down in matches and brilliant, or the mercurial's the best term for them, you know, is because the famous thing that makes Gambit amazing is that they never let you bleed them dry, okay? Say they are losing and they're down the 5k gold and they're going to be in a situation where you're going to hit the power spike with all your items. You've all got an extra item on your carries before them. They won't let you get there. What they'll do is Diamond will create a situation where they're just going to go in on you in some crazy 40-60, but because it's a 40-60 there, it's better than the 20-80 that they're going to be facing in 5 minutes. Now, what's funny is that is awesome when they have the intuitive play. That's how they own you. And you're like, God, how did they win that fight? And everyone came in at exactly the right time. They focused the right guy. Well, what's funny is when they're off, that's what loses them the game and makes them get owned. Because the strategical team knows that you don't have to do that. If you can just make the next 10 decisions right, then you can crawl your way back so that the 20-80 is now like a 40-60, but late game macro style. It's not the 40-60 1 second. It's over there. And then you make the next 5 decisions right. Suddenly it's a 50-50. You see what I mean? The correct way to play. That's the thing people have always made the mistake of. They understand when you're ahead to keep doing the correct thing. No, if you're better than the other team and you're behind, you don't have to make the big play. You just keep doing the correct decision, and that's what catches you up. Because the same way they got ahead
because
of you,
because you have to, and the reason why to say this is because I don't think you're articulating it in this way, but it's that if you are the better team and you make a couple bad decisions early, but you can make the rest of the decisions properly, you can wait for your opponent, confident that they're going to make more mistakes.
Exactly, yeah. I've always said, okay, so people would always say, this is a really big problem in StarCraft, okay? Because you know in StarCraft, it's super binary. You either win the map or you lose the map. So it doesn't matter how many good decisions you made. If you lose the map at the end, then you think like, oh, I did the wrong approach. So what would always happen was there would be these sub-stories of all these top pros that go like this. Yeah, man, I was up 2 maps to 1 in this best of 5. Like I was going to win, and then he came back and won the last 2 maps and he beat me. Or, I was like so close, and if I don't just make that one mistake, I was ahead the whole game and then I lost the game. And I would always say to them, listen, in some of those scenarios, you're right. But what you're not ever crediting is that, first of all, he might have made you made a tiny mistake at the end that cost you the game. Maybe he made a tiny mistake at the beginning of the game that gave you the edge, that made you think you're ahead. And then all he's done is make his correct decision at the end of the game where you made yours at the beginning. And now you don't credit his. His is a fluke because you were ahead. But you never credit that maybe he made a mistake to let you... You see what I mean? It's like, you're being too biased to your own results. Anything that happens for you is never luck. And anything that happens for the enemy is always luck. That's the wrong mentality to have. And unfortunately, it's a player-centric way because they think so, like, this move, was that right or wrong? Depending on the result. They don't think of, like, was it the right way to play, And so what's funny is I think you can apply this to all these teams, Gambit, ROCCAT. You can see how they have an approach, and as long as it's working, just going to stick with that approach. Just keep doing it, bro. And even when it's not working, they have to be convinced of that. Like, ROCCAT haven't changed play overnight because they've lost all these games. I'll guarantee they'll probably play the same style throughout the rest of the season, and they just hope, oh, we were having a bad week, or, oh, we weren't motivated. Yeah, well, what happened was we had an argument before the game, like, all that shit that doesn't have anything to do with the factors we've just discussed. That's what they'll put it down to.
That's like the worst mentality, too.
Whereas even in reality, you usually lose because of the decisions you made in the game. It's usually got nothing to do with it, that bullshit, man. Okay,
That's,
I think we...
Yeah, I just think that's why it's so important to go over those macro basics. And you really need to take a step back from the game itself. And I think that this is what the approach I took with CLG, and ask, not divorce it from League of Legends. Take the voice comm on its own and ask yourself, is this clear? And ask yourself, and take a step back from League of Legends strategy and ask, what is effective in Battlefield strategy in general, in war? Because the weird thing about esports is they're actually, Art of War and these books about combat tactics are more applicable to esports because esports, like war, has fog of war and traditional sports don't. And that is incomplete information is the reality of real war. And so actual battlefield tactics apply insanely well to esports in general.
No, that's the thing, because in chess, you can see the whole board the whole
exactly.
time. There's no incomplete information. So as a result, chess is actually a game where you're just aiming to make the perfect decision. This is why someone like Chaucer, I gave that example in that CLG piece I wrote, okay, about the history of CLG and the problems they had with the old hotshot Saint lineup. The problem they had was if Chaucer was the shot caller, he played it like he could freeze time and it was a turn-based game like chess. And he could say, right, everyone, before I make my shot call, let me think. Their bot lane's doing this right now, and he's doing that. And if you give the guy 20 minutes, he'd probably come up with a creative approach, exactly the right thing to do. He'd know the right way to play. But the problem is, in the 3 seconds that he had to make a call based only on the info he has now, he wouldn't do it. Or he'd defer to someone else. Or he'd make the call, then he'd change his mind. Like, that's what I mean. Like, you have to have the process in your mind already.
Correct. That
you can trust in the second that the decision that seems right is the right one.
Correct. And the way you do that is, it's not really breaking new ground. All you have to do is look at thousands of years of writing on battlefield tactics, because every successful general makes decisions on incomplete information. So you don't ask in esports, what would I do in observer mode? What would I do? What would be the decisions I make as if it's a game of chess? You have to say, what does a general do? What is the thought process? What is the strategic decision-making process of a general who knows he has incomplete information, and how do they cope with that? And that, I think, is what's really key to making a good team.
I mean, that's also, to tie it back into the Gambit thing, actually, that's what makes the intuitive style work, is that essentially, when I described those two different scenarios, okay, so the super strict team and the very, very loose team. The super strict team, part of why it works is even if we lose, we're going to have one plan that we follow. One guy will tell us the plan. And so we'll leave it to him to make the call on what's going wrong and fix it, okay? And so with bad players, that's the ideal system, because then I'm not having them make bad decisions. I have my best guy make the decisions. Now, in a perfect world, we'd have it like that, like an army. But then if you've ever read much about battlefield tactics, part of why supposedly the Allies won World War II is that the way the German army fought was like every communication went back to one central guy, and he made an ultimate decision that went back down the pipes. Whereas what the Allies did was they had all the armies split up into troops of generals, right? And each general could make his own autonomous decision. And so as long as he's a good general, then he can make a decision faster and in the moment and do the right thing in a way that the German army would have to wait and hear what their decision, and then it'd come out and it'd be more hesitant, okay? So the point is, the intuitive style is almost like you've made everyone the shot caller. That only works, though, if you have the perfect lineup. I always used to say this to the CLG EU guys, okay? Because I was like vague, I was a little bit friendly with some of them when I was first getting into the scene, okay? And so I got to talk to some of them privately. And I'd say to them, like, guys, you guys should definitely have an analyst. And you should probably even like use more shot calling in your team. And they would be like, no, the democratic method works best for us. And I said, yeah, but the problem with the democratic method is it has to work perfectly. Otherwise, it doesn't work at all. Because as soon as even one person disagrees, that is hesitation, and that's who we're going to listen to, and we're going to do this. So as long as it's all working and you're winning, then it's going to seem amazing. But as soon as that breaks down, you have nowhere to go. You have no system that you can then put in place or something like that. And so that's always going to be the problem. Like, I would always go with the other system approach myself, because odds are you don't have the genius super team that can do that. And so It's usually just best. That's why in every fucking
That's how I
sport,
feel too.
we have rules and we have principles and we have a structure that's set in place. Although I have to admit, by the way, I've always been a fan of the system approach, especially because you can take lesser players like SK, okay? You can take players there who aren't going to be considered top 3 at their position. Almost no one except Candy Panda would be considered top 3 at his position in SK, okay? Yet, they might be the best team in LCS for all we know right now, because their system is the best. Now, I will admit, as great as that is, and it is the right way to play, if the team that does the intuitive style really are on their shit, that is the most beautiful way. Because it's just something, it's so perfect to watch. I can't deny it is.
Yeah. But
I mean,
like you said, it's lightning in a bottle, and you can't bet on that, in my opinion.
Like even if you think about it, I even thought the funny thing was, you can even take. I'll give you a Chinese example to get to because I've given too many non-league examples here. People are gonna get mad. I'll give a League of Legends example of this. So Royal Club is the super strict system, because if you ever saw any of those slow-mo breakdowns of their team fights, it was fucking genius. The 4 guys who aren't called Uzi know that at all times their job is to make a wall in front of Uzi so no one can get past the front line and he can kill everyone. And at all times, you could slow it down and be, how are they doing this? It's because that they just had that in their mind the whole time. Like, where's Uzi? What am I doing in relation to Uzi? How can I get my body in the way of his shot so that he can keep killing people? Now, the other Chinese team, OMG, is the intuitive style. They just go in on you and they tower dive you and they take an aggressive fight here, and it's just craziness. It's complete chaos. And for everyone else, that's going to be really bad. But that works really awesome for their team. And so these are the two absolute extremes. But you have to see, unless the OMG team was really godlike, that style loses to the strategical approach. When you're both similar skill level and you're both like on the same level, the strategical approach is more consistent and you'll win out in that sense. What do you think of this example?
I think it's fine. I wouldn't say OMG was like the pinnacle of kind of the wild and crazy style, but I think in terms of China at the time, it probably was the closest to that. I would say OMG's they're definitely on that end of the spectrum, and I would agree that Royal was extremely regimented in both their picks and their team fighting style. The thing about OMG was they had a little bit more versatility in terms of split pushing. So I think OMG had a bit stricter approach when it came to where they put people in lanes and how they split push. But yeah, for the most part, I think their more unbridled aggression was a result of that. But yeah, I think that's a relatively apt example of that kind of style going through.
I think we've got to a lot of stuff this episode, considering we only talked about 2 topics. So I think we'll wrap it up now.
Yeah, I think that's good for today.
Yeah, that's pretty good. On the future episodes, by the way, guys, like I'm going to be away in Poland this week for the IEM and EMS event. My plan for the next one is I think we'll do the next one. Let's try and do it live, and then I'll bring a guest on as well. So we'll try and do both those things and expand the format just to test it out. But in future, we're definitely going to have some guests on. But again, like you've seen from the way this episode goes, we can still get some good conversation in with 2 of us. So I think in general, we'll kind of pick and choose which specific guest, because I don't want it to be like those talk shows where you have someone on and you see the name on paper, like, oh my God, he's going to be on. And then that guy just sits silently the whole time and like never says anything. It has to, if we have someone on, I guarantee you
the right person.
I will vet these people and I will make sure, like I have some players who've already agreed to come on, and I told them straight up, like, if I say someone and I know that you think he's bad and you don't say he's bad, there's going to be problems, dude. Like, I'm going to call you out on bullshit. And they were like, and luckily I picked the right people. So they were like, no, I can handle it. Okay. So if we do have a guest, look forward to it. But otherwise, I think that's it for this episode. Any final thoughts, Monte? Something to leave the viewers with?
Can we please change the name from All Stars to something, anything else? Anything.
What name should we call it instead, do you think? I think just something like the Summer Ensemble or some bullshit, you know.
The Summer Spectacular.
Yeah. Why not, you know? Okay, so the point wherever it cut off there that I was going to make was the whole reason in season 3, supposedly, why we couldn't have the international tournaments, like I wanted to have like an IPL type event or a MLG, you know, one of those tournaments, was that they kept saying over and over, like, oh, wouldn't it be it'll be less cool though, you know, guys, you want everything to build up to the World Championship, and that's when all the teams play, and you know, all year you've been seeing who's the best in America, who's the best in Europe. Well, now this All-Star event basically surely goes against that entire logic, which I didn't agree with anyway, by the way, so I'm glad they did that anyway. Thanks for sort of inadvertently telling me that I was right in the past. But
well,
sort of
and
going
also,
against that.
I think thanks to the fans who put a lot of pressure on it, because we all wanted more international competition.
Sure. Yeah.
And so at least Riot listened.
No, that's good. I mean, that's the other thing. I always think of Riot. Like, I think I heard this famous statement once about America as a country that said America always does the right thing as the last option. That's kind of how I think of Riot. Okay, they're not malevolent. Okay, guys, they have a different order in how they get through things. You know. So anyway, I think that topic sums it up. Anyway, so goodbye from me. Goodbye from Monte Cristo. We'll be back after IEM, after EMS. We'll do another show, maybe a guest, maybe live.
We'll have a lot to talk about too with the IEM results as the first international tournament in a while. It'll be fun,
and it won't ruin Worlds.
We can cry about the KT bullets together.
I'm sure we will do that as well. Okay, it's a wrap. It's over.
All right, great show.
Okay, we're here on the second episode of Summoning Insight, my show with Monte Cristo here.